Hey Bookish Babes, and welcome to the 12 Days of Vlogmas, Day 8. For those who don't know me, my name's Rainy, and I teach elementary music and middle school musical theater, and I also read all types of books, primarily thriller and horror, but I don't just bog myself down with any genre. I will read anything and everything. So if you're interested in that, please like and subscribe to my channel down below. It'll really help my channel grow. If you are new around here, we have started the 12 Days of Vlogmas. We are currently on day 8. If you have missed a day, you are welcome to go look at the playlist down below and go see what you have missed. But we are in the middle of one of my favorite series of the year where I talk about my most surprising books, my most disappointing books, my best books, and my worst books of the year. Yesterday we did most surprising books. And today we are doing most disappointing. And the difference between the disappointing and the worst books of the year is that these aren't, well, obviously they're not my worst books. Like, these didn't actually make me, like, livid and mad. These are more just books that I went into with pretty high expectations and they didn't do that for me. Or something about it didn't work. And I'm just a little sad that I didn't enjoy it as much as I had, and I wish I had enjoyed it as much as I had hoped. But they're not like, oh my god, this is awful, nobody should read this type books. In fact, I don't think any book in this list has gotten below a 3-star, and 3-star is pretty middle of the road, average, like, rating review for me. So, in fact, I even have some that are 4 stars on here, but they were still disappointing because I thought they were going to be 5 stars. So, if you're interested in that, then we're going to get started talking about my top, I believe it is, how many do I have? My top 10 most disappointing reads of 2022. And here we go. Okay, many of the books in this series my mom is either borrowing or I cannot locate at the moment. So it is what it is. So I'll just pop them up on the screen. But the first book that we have that was one of the first books that I read this year, and one of the most disappointing that I read this year, was Shiver by Ali Reynolds. And at first I had given it a 4-star, and upon further reflection I bumped it down to a 3-star. So that one is an isolation like setting trope, which I love. It takes place with like this group of people that they were like skiers, like professional, like, or like competitive skiers, and an accident happened and one of them died like 10 years prior, and then 10 years later their friend group is all like invited back to the ski resort for some reason, and of course it's like a plot to get them all in the same room so that the murderer can actually like have vengeance and do more murdery crap. And I love books like that. I love isolation settings. Like, that is always a thing for me. However, the plot ruined this for me. So like, I even appreciated that this book, because I also love dual timeline perspectives where you'll go from like present day to like back like 10 years ago when like all of this was happening, so you get to like experience the characters in like both settings, and I really appreciate stuff like that. However, this did not work for me because of literally the murderer and the twist and all the stuff, because it is just so unbelievable. Like, I think about it still and I'm just like, that does not fly. Like, I can't get behind it. And so it honestly bumped it down 2 whole stars for me because I was pretty annoyed by how it ended. And I just feel like it could have been handled so much better. I have another book by her that's kind of isolation-y setting too, called The Swell, and I've been hesitant on reading it because of this, but I do want to read it, so I'm still going to. But literally, the plot alone can sometimes knock a book down a lot. And if you want a good isolation thriller, I still would recommend it. But don't expect the twist to be believable, because it's not. And I'm just like, you could have tried a little harder, Miss Reynolds. You could have tried a little harder. Then the next book that we have on this list is The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. And I believe I read this in February for Gabby's book troop. And it got a 3 stars for me. And it was going to get a 2 or a 2.5 stars for me because this book is slower than molasses. It is about this man, I can't remember his name, but his daughter is Finch, and they live in the woods by themselves. Like, I guess the mother passed away. I'm not really sure what happened there, but they live there isolated from the woods because of something that happened, and you never really find out until the end what happened and why they're isolated. But every year, once a year, his old best friend will come with a bunch of groceries for them so that they don't have to go out into, like, public light. And their best friend doesn't show one year, and so he has to go and take his daughter into town and not let anyone see her and get all the groceries and stuff. And then this, like, stranger or visitor comes to their area, and there's all this other stuff going on, and it's just like, what if they're found? Like, what will happen? And I kid you not, this was the slowest plot ever. Like, literally nothing was happening until, like, the 80% mark. And I was just done. I was ready to DNF. But at that point, I wanted to see what was happening because I was reading it with a bunch of other people. And they were all saying, keep going, keep going. This book gets better at the 80% mark. And so I tried to believe them. And And the ending alone brought it up an entire star for me. I cried. The ending was very sad. It had a good, sad ending. But that couldn't justify how much of a sludge that I felt getting through the whole rest of the book. I really tried, my friends. I really tried. And I do think that I will read more from this author. I think this was their debut. I could be wrong. They might have written books before this. And I don't know. I feel like I did like what the story was trying to say. I just think that there are better ways to write this sort of story. And this just didn't do it for me. Yet I know other people that rant and rave about this book and give it 5 stars. So like maybe you're of a different opinion than me. But it just didn't work for me. The next book on this list is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I believe I read this in the beginning of the year and I gave it a 3.5 star. And I don't know. I just saw this book and I just thought I was going to love it, especially because it was one of like Book of the Month's top 5 picks. Although now we know that that means nothing because Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow was the top book of the year and like all these other books that like I never would have voted on in my life for this year. But anyway, this one, if I remember correctly, follows like 3 different perspectives. It follows like this old lost apothecary and how she like used these potions to like kill people or men that deserved it. And then there's this woman in the present day that is like splitting up from her boyfriend or husband who cheated on her. And she finds the old lost apothecary's like place and like is trying to piece together like the pieces of this old lost apothecary. And you also follow one of the children that is like following along with the lost apothecary in the olden days, trying to like be like her. And I just kind of thought this didn't really like have a huge plot. It didn't really go anywhere. It was a good book and it was like interesting and I still enjoyed it. But like it didn't really, I didn't feel like it had anything to say. Like it was just there. Like it was just like a moment in time where I'm not sad that I picked up this book. But I would have been okay if I hadn't picked up this book because honestly, it had nothing of importance to say. And I don't really understand why it was written. Like, I don't understand what the purpose of this book was. I mean, it was still beautifully written. I still had a good time with it. I read through it pretty quickly. I still highly recommend it if you're interested in, like, lighter historical fiction-y type books. But it's definitely not anything that is, like, substantial and, like, you're going to remember for the rest of your life type deal. The next book we have on this list is A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell mystery series. I think there's, like, 8 of them. And I read this because it's one of Katie Coulson's favorite books. And I was going to do a Katie Coulson video, and I still plan on doing it one day. But this one is about Veronica Speedwell, and she hunts butterflies. It has some fancy name, and I don't remember what it is. But she ends up getting almost abducted, and this German baron, who's a friend of hers, offers her sanctuary in the care of his friend Stoker, who's a reclusive and bad-tempered natural historian. But before the baron can say what he knows, like why she was trying to get abducted, he is murdered, and so Veronica and Stoker are on the run from an assailant as they're also trying to find out the villainous truth. And I thought, for some reason, that I was going to love this book because she was ranting and raving about it, and I thought it was going to be a 5 star. And it was a 4 star, which is not bad. But I honestly almost DNF'd it in the beginning because the writing is a little hard to get used to. And it's just written in like very old, I don't even know, like Britishy. I don't even know how to explain it. But it just was not what I was expecting, I suppose. And as I went on, I began starting to like the characters more and more. But it definitely took me a while to get into this. And I just thought for sure it was going to be a 5 star from the get-go and the jump. And considering that I almost DNF'd it, that was a little upsetting to me. But I still really enjoyed it. I have bought the second book since then, so I do plan on continuing on with the series because it did get a 4 stars for me. I'm probably going to have to reread the first one, though, because I do not remember a lick of what happened in it. But it is interesting. I just was for sure that it was going to be a 5 star. And when something is not a 5 star and you really had your hopes set on it, it is a little disappointing, you know? But, like I said, I will still read this. It's still a good time. Then we had The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. And this one was a huge letdown for me because when I read the guest list last year, I read that in like a day and I gave it 5 stars automatically. It was one of the best books I had read. It's still one of my favorite books ever. It was so good the way that she put all of those twists and turns together, and it just blew my mind. It was a fantastic read. And then I read this, and this was a 3.5 star, and it just wasn't as exciting, and I didn't get the same feelings that I felt with the guest list. And this one is about Jess. She's basically broke and alone. She's left her job under less than ideal circumstances. Her half-brother, Ben, she asks if she could crash with him in his apartment in Paris for a while, only when she gets there, he's missing. And so the longer he's missing, the more she starts to dig into his situation and the more questions she has. His neighbors are eclectic and weird. She may have come to escape her past, but it looks like it's Ben's future that's in doubt. Everyone's a neighbor. Everyone's a suspect. Everyone knows something they're not telling. The plot twist in the middle was kind of whatever for me. Like, I didn't really care about it here or there. Like, I just couldn't stand, like, half of the characters in this book. I just wasn't as intrigued throughout the entire story with this. Like, I was at the 200 page mark and I was just like snoozing. I was just ready to be done with this book. Like, I don't know. I just didn't feel it was as nicely crafted as the guest list. Like, that just is like a perfect thriller for me. It just put the pieces together so well. And this one, while it wasn't bad and it didn't have like a terrible ending per se, and like it does make sense, everything that happened, it just didn't do it for me. And so honestly, this is probably one of my most disappointing reads of the year, because I just had such high expectations for this book after getting off of that high of the guest list. And it just didn't do it for me. The next book on this list happens to be Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which I know I still have that book because I would never have gotten rid of it. I had a very pretty edition, but I don't know where I put it. And I know my mom didn't borrow it. So it's Gallant by V.E. Schwab, and this is the first V.E. Schwab book that I have ever read, and I went into it expecting it to be good because a lot of people were saying that it was good and it looked very cute and it was more YA. However, it is a middle grade. It does not disguise itself well. And it was not that great of a middle grade. It was just kind of boring. So this one, I can't even remember exactly, but I believe it's about a little girl who is an orphan now because her family has passed. And she gets an invitation from, like, her uncle to, like, move into, like, this cool, like, mansion-y estate. But when she gets there, like, there's a lot of ghosts and, like, all this other stuff going on. And it wasn't bad. It just was slow-moving. It was middle grade. I'm not a middle grade reader. And it was just kind of middle of the road for me because I did give it a 3 stars. And I kind of didn't like the ending. I felt like it was kind of rushed. I didn't really understand what was going on. It has beautiful pictures in the copy that I have. And it was very beautifully written. Like, V.E. Schwab does have a beautiful way of writing books. But I didn't care about anything that was going on. I did feel for our main character. She was very sweet. She had a lot of issues going on. But it just wasn't anything substantial. It was kind of lackluster for me. And I'm definitely going to read more of V.E. Schwab, like her adult stuff, because this was like a middle grade one. And I don't think that was a good representation of what she can write. But it just wasn't it. You know? The next one on this list is I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. And I had pretty high expectations for this solely because of Red, White, and Blue. Now, have I read Red, White, and Blue? No. But everybody and their mother rants and raves about it. They don't rant and rave about One Last Stop, but they do rant and rave about Red, White, and Blue. And I figured if that book was fantastic, this book would be fantastic. And this one is about Chloe Green. Basically, she is competing for valedictorian against the prom queen, Shara Wheeler. But a month before graduation, Shara Wheeler kisses Chloe and vanishes. And so Chloe is like, well, where did she go? And she finds out she's not the only one that Shara kissed. She's also kissed her longtime quarterback sweetheart Smith, and then Rory, which is Shara's bad boy neighbor with a crush. The three have nothing in common except for Shara and the cryptic notes that she's left behind, but they have to, like, find her clues to find her, and Chloe thinks it'll be worth it if I can actually beat her as valedictorian. And it starts to get crazy from there. It was a cute little book. I believe I gave it 3.5 stars. Like, I still really had a fun time with it. However, the thing that, like, killed it for me is the fact that Shara Wheeler is not a great person. Like, you're not supposed to root for Shara. So it's like, why are these 3 people upending, like, the rest of their senior year to look for this girl that clearly didn't care about either of them if she's willing to kiss all of them? And she doesn't ever justify her reasons. She's not ever particularly kind to any of them. So to me, it just didn't make sense. Like, why would these characters be doing anything and everything to find her and, like, follow her stupid little cryptic notes and crap if she never really cared about them anyway, and she just was never that kind of a person? And I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. And yeah, I get it. Like, they're all high schoolers. And yeah, they probably were all obsessed with her. But it just didn't work for me. I just couldn't get past that. I was just like, why are you guys doing this? Like, the more I hear about this girl, like, she just sounds stupid as hell. And you guys are just bending over backwards for her. And I just cannot fathom why. So it was just kind of whatever for me. But I did have fun with it. And I love that, like, at the end of each chapter, it has stuff like this. Like, from the burn pile. And it's all different sorts of stuff. Like, this one is a code of conduct. This one is a valedictorian speech draft. Like, I really liked all of that stuff. And the audiobook was really cool in that regard. So I might recommend it still. But it was still a fun time nonetheless. It was just kind of disappointing. Then we have one that I'm fairly disappointed that I didn't love this. And that is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. I gave this a 3 star. However, I think the biggest reason that this did not get a 5 star is because of freaking Peter Swanson and 9 Lives, which, don't worry, I have a whole rant saved for the worst books of 2022, because that is by far the worst book of 2022 that I've read. He ruined And Then There Were None for me in this book. Like, he told me who it was, who the villain was, all the stuff. And so I went into this knowing. And then it just seemed very obvious and very predictable to me. And so throughout this book, I was like, oh, this is so predictable. However, would I have thought it was predictable if I didn't know who it was? That is my question. And I'll never know the answer to that. So I just kind of went into this going, I feel like it wrapped up too nicely in a nice little bow. And then I was like, yeah, but this was one of the first books. This was the first book of its time that did something like that. Like, you probably would have enjoyed it a lot more if Peter Swanson hadn't ruined it for you. And I do agree with that statement. And I still had a good time with it. It's just, first off, the writing is very old. It has a lot of stuff that would not be accepted in this day and age, but you just have to get past that for Miss Christie, because this was literally written in like the 1920s. And so the writing took me a little bit to get used to, but I did enjoy it. I feel like some of the kills were just too convenient, and the ending just wrapped up way too nicely. I still think that. Like, I just don't think that the end of that murder would have happened like this. But if you don't happen to know what this is by chance, it's about 10 strangers. They're all invited to this mansion for some reason or another, and they don't understand why. And then a message at dinner says that each of them have murdered someone, and so they are each going to die in return, and they start dying off one by one. But it's very clear that one of the people on the island is actually the murderer itself. And I'm just sad that it was ruined for me. I'm very disappointed. It was just a 3-star, and I wish I had liked it more. But at least I finally know why this book is so popular. Then we have a book that I, for some reason, thought was going to be 5 stars, because Noelle Gallagher absolutely loved it. Although I don't think it was 5 stars for her either. I think it was 4 or 4.5. However, I have really learned that me and Noelle do not have similar tastes, and yet I keep gravitating towards books that she says are going to be fantastic. I still love her. She's just too smart for me. And that was Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. I mean, look at this cover. I think, honestly, the cover alone just made me really want to read this book. And it's about an ambitious mother who puts her art career on hold to stay at home with her newborn son, but the experience is not what she was expecting. And 2 years later, she goes into the bathroom to take a break from her toddler, only to find dense hair, a patch of hair on the back of her neck, and she starts to think she's turning into a dog. And then she joins this group of women that's kind of like culty-ish, trying to find more friends, and it just gets crazy from there. And I gave this book a 3-star. Honestly, I probably should have given it like a 2.5 or something. I was bored throughout most of this book. I'm surprised that I finished this book. I feel like also she was just basically having very negative connotations about motherhood throughout this whole book, saying how hard it is, how you lose yourself as a person and all this. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't feel like I've lost myself as a person by having my son. I think I've gotten even better as a person. Like, my son just brings out the best in me. And so I don't necessarily agree with that. And it was really negative and like harping to have to continue to hear her say that over and over. Like, maybe this author in real life has had a bad experience as a mom. Maybe they're not actually a mom in real life. I don't know. If they're not, then I don't think they have the ability to be able to write about that appropriately. But I don't know. It was just boring. It just was. And I was very disappointed because I thought I was going to love it. And I clearly didn't, because it was really boring. So I do not necessarily recommend to everyone this book. And then let's get to the number 1 book that I am most disappointed about. And it's not even because I thought it was going to be great, because honestly, I had not heard one solid review from anybody yet. It is more that I'm just very upset because I really wanted to love it, because the main character has my name in it. Ugh! And that is An Honest Lie by Taryn Fisher. The main character is Rainy, y'all. Rainy! I mean, how much better can I say? And it's spelled the right way, because there is no E in Rainy. If you spell it that way, I'm sorry, but that is wrong. That is not how the English dictionary spells Rainy. I don't even care, okay? I get very on that regard. But this one is about Lorraine, but she goes by Rainy. She lives on Tiger Mountain. It's remote and moody. It's this new life so she can forget everything that she experienced in the past, which is like this cult type stuff. She agrees to this girls' weekend in Vegas with like all the neighbors, her like snooty rich hoity-toity neighbors. And after a wild night, one of her friends doesn't come back to the hotel room. So then she gets a text message from that girl's phone that someone has her, but they want Rainy, and it's obviously someone from the cult and all of that sort of stuff. And she has to go on a journey to find her friend and like deal with her past trauma. And like I said, I had not heard one positive review about this before I went into this, but I was just holding out hope because the main character's name was Rainy, and that never ever happens to me. And it was awful. First off, the stuff that's on the back doesn't happen till like 80% in. Like, it is literally just rich, boring people trauma like drama throughout the beginning. And then they do a lot of flashbacks between now and then, getting to see what's happening and going on now, and then the trauma of the past with the cult. But sometimes they did too much in the past, like there would be then, and it's like, okay, like I want to catch up to the present. I want to see how this is all going to like fix itself in real life. And my battery is about to die, so I'm going to finish this on my phone. Nothing happened really until the 80% mark, and then the end was just so crazy and ridiculous, I just couldn't go for it. And so I'm pretty sure I gave this a 3-star, and that was being generous because I just really wanted to have hope in Rainy, and Rainy let me down, and she was an obnoxious character, and I'm very offended and upset. And I don't know if I'll ever get another Rainy book again, honestly, unless I write a book with Rainy in it, who maybe I will. You don't know. You don't know what I'm going to do. But it was my most disappointing read, and it was honestly just because I really held out hope that my main character would be a badass, and this would be a great book. But it was not. I don't really recommend this. I've heard Taryn Fisher is just striking out ever since she left her like YA dark romance era, and like The Wives wasn't good, The Wrong Family apparently was awful, and Honest Lie is not that good. So maybe she's just not a thriller writer. Who knows? Only Miss Taryn knows, or doesn't apparently. And those were my most disappointing books of 2022. Like I said, none of them got below a 3-star, and some of them even got 4 stars. They were just books that I was expecting to have liked better than I did, and so I'm a little sad by it, but you know, it is what it is. But stay tuned for tomorrow's video, which I don't actually remember off the top of my head what it is, so it's just going to be a surprise. Like I said, we are a day behind because of me getting like super sick 2 days ago, so like the last video will air, the best books of 2022 will air on the 26th. But be prepared for tomorrow when we get to day 9 of Vlogmas. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!